can hear John gently typing on
I'm
his
typing
masterfully
sort of loudly.
typing. You are typing loudly, but you just want people to think that you're planning for our episode.
And yeah, there's really no chance of them thinking that.
No, I know. It's because they know, because we talk about it all the time.
That we don't plan for anything.
No, we don't plan for anything.
Except for disaster.
Well, I mean, the perfect example is this past week. You know, it was the 4th of July, and my family did not plan for jack poop. And I say poop because you like poopy pants. We were not disappointed with that. We actually ended up having a lot more fun because when you don't plan, sometimes you end up just enjoying yourself a lot more.
It's really easy to surpass low expectations.
Exactly.
That's going to be on my headstone, I think.
It's under promise, over deliver.
Yes.
It's the same when it comes to business. It's the same when it comes to products and brands and things like that. So,
or it's just a sign of laziness.
Well, that too, but I wasn't going to go there because I know I'm lazy. You know I'm lazy. Our listeners don't know. Well, most of them do know that I'm really freaking lazy, but that's just me.
I don't think
I chose
lazy.
to do a podcast so I wouldn't have to get dressed.
I'm wearing pants, which is odd.
I'm wearing pants, just, not nice pants.
I don't think people expect you to dress in a crisp suit or anything like that. Nick, just before we logged in today, I was finishing up ironing my shirt for today's podcast, and people would think we're weirder than they think already.
Well, they don't think it, John. They know it.
Now you're just really just wrestling with yourself.
Yes, I am.
I know. Hey, I know something about you.
What?
You're sort of shopping for cars, aren't you?
I am. I have been for a while. Yeah.
How long is a while?
We are probably outside the average car buyer. What do they call that? Buying path. I should know this. That's because it's my profession and we talk about it in store all the time. The journey. Thank you. Car buyer journey. I'm well past that. Obviously I can't even keep the words in my head. I don't stick to it. But it's been a little while because so I bought using my old car. I actually used my old car to trade in, and I did it for several reasons. One of which being I was very underwater. We talked about this on our leasing episode.
Right.
I had a lot of negative equity built into this car, and I had several years to actually before I was even close to paying it off, and it was getting high in miles, and it was ready. It was time to go. And my wife wanted a new car, so I actually got her an SUV. For the same payment as I was paying on my car. So she got a 4-year newer, or almost 5-year newer car with a lot more technology, a lot more comfortable, exactly what she wanted. And she kind of wanted a unicorn, and we found her unicorn. And again, I wasn't spending any more money, and I rolled it into a lease. So I'm eating up all that negative equity, and we're happy.
Brilliant.
But that put me in her old car. And I hate her old car.
So can you say what it is or no?
Oh yeah, it's a Nissan Sentra.
Okay.
It's a good car. Don't get me wrong. It's a very good car.
What don't you like about it?
It's small.
Yeah.
It doesn't ride very well. It rides rough. And while it does get good gas mileage, the car I was driving was actually a Nissan Altima. And we'll get into the cars themselves and how I feel about them in a little bit here. But the Sentra is just small. It rides rough. The gas tank is small. So I end up filling up twice as much as I did on my Altima because it doesn't go nearly as far in a tank of gas, even though the gas mileage is good compared to most vehicles. So I'm not a fan of it. And I'm also a techie. I don't know if anyone knows that. I just really like my technology. And I actually have to jerry rig my phone to be able to do my navigation and play my podcast at the same time. And so I have like 6 wires coming out of everything just to make sure and power it at the same time, power the phone to make sure it charges.
And I saw that, and I have to say
you did.
That it is quite impressive.
It's pretty epic, isn't it?
It is epic, yes.
And you've noticed I changed the colors on all the cords so they're really bright and they stand out. So it's not a subtle thing. I made it purposely not subtle. So anyways, if you can't tell already, I am not a fan of this car.
Well, no, and
Um,
it's nothing against the Sentra, just because it is what it is. It's an inexpensive vehicle that gets good fuel economy, but doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. Is not overly comfortable because it's smallish, and
right.
so it's doing what it does pretty well, frankly. But it's not for you, and that's why there are so many vehicles on the
Exactly.
market, because everybody has different tastes. And as much as you drive, one of them is certainly
Then that's
comfort.
the key right
Yeah.
there. Exactly. I drive so much I don't want to be uncomfortable. This is a great car for in town, running around, which is what it did for my
Yep.
wife when she was driving it. It's perfect for that. It's small, it can get in and out of places, it's quick, it's really zippy, but it's not made for 4 or 5 hour drives that you do every single
It's
day.
really
It's just
zippy.
it's
Yes.
zippy, it's quick.
Yes.
And it doesn't have more power than my Ultima did, but it's not as heavy as my Ultima, so it really gets up and goes pretty quickly. It's
Zippy.
not a sports car either, but
Zippy.
it's zippy.
I like it.
Yeah. So going back to that now, the Ultima, great car. I enjoyed it. Sentra, I've had about 5 Nissans now. I live in Nashville, and Nissan is headquartered here, and that's one of the reasons. So the Nissans are a big deal down here, and they're the dealers are plentiful. Let's put it
Well, you're
that way.
supporting your local economy too, because Nissan has made quite an investment in the Nashville area. There's no doubt.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly. So, and Mitsubishi's coming here because of that.
Oh,
That's a whole other
yeah.
story. Anyway, did you hear that in the news? Mitsubishi is moving their headquarters from California to
I
Franklin.
heard some telling of it. I did not realize that it was a done deal.
Yep, it's done deal. They are already hiring people here in Nashville
Wow,
to
terrific.
fill spots. Yeah, I
Terrific
think
for
I
Nashville.
don't. It is terrific for Nashville. It's going to mean an extra 200 jobs, so that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Anyway, that has nothing to do with the conversation. So anyway, I have not, since my last Jeep, and I know I talk about Jeeps all the time. They're my favorite vehicle, but since my last Jeep, I have honestly not owned a vehicle that I have 100% wanted. I've owned vehicles that I've needed to have for one reason or other, whether it's financial or whether it's um, based on the number of miles I put on it, fuel economy, things like that. Not that I've disliked any of the cars I've had. I just haven't had one that I
Yep.
truly just want. So I've come to a point now, they call it midlife crisis because this is about the time in your age that you hear people having their midlife crisis. Call it that, or just I'm sick and tired over the
Yep.
last 8 years of not driving exactly what I want to drive. I am shopping for a car I actually want to drive. And that's one of the reasons it's
So,
taking me so long.
well, I
So,
asked because
so John, why do you ask?
people are going to think we planned this.
All right.
Yes. I asked because I'm actually looking to, and maybe not quite as much as you, but I like Jeeps as well. I just, I don't like them as much as you do.
But are you looking at a Jeep?
Well, it was one that I was looking at. The problem is for what they are, and this is just my opinion based on my research, they are way more expensive than the average vehicle.
Oh, yes, they are. Which is honestly one of the reasons I haven't pulled the trigger yet.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple of other types of vehicles besides Jeeps that I am interested and would love to drive.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of weighing my options right now.
So I'm looking, here's an example. Here's a 2014 Wrangler Unlimited with 48,000 miles for 22 grand.
That's not bad.
In that range,
That's really not bad.
I could also buy a Mercedes-Benz E-Class with lower miles and maybe even newer, but let's say not. So I just question and say, which would I rather drive?
The Jeep.
Which would ride nicer on the highway?
Oh, come on. If you've got to deal with ride, that's a completely
Which would
different
ride
story.
nicer in town?
Which would ride nicer, period. Come on.
Yes, I know.
Well,
I
okay,
know.
so here's where
Which
my
would
decision.
ride nicer off-road?
Yeah, right. Probably the Mercedes. No, I'm kidding. I say that because I actually, with my very first Jeep, the car I had before that, I actually took off road more often than I took the Jeep because
Did
I
you
was
really?
afraid of getting the Jeep not dirty. I loved the Jeep when it was dirty. I was afraid of damaging the Jeep because it was so pretty.
Wow.
Anyway, that was when I was 18. People, my idea of things have changed. Ideas of things. Anyway, if you were actually giving me that option, those two particular options, I would honestly take the Mercedes.
And so that's kind of what I've been looking at. Like you, and as we discussed in our lease episode, we have been leasing people, and the vehicle that Lisa, who's my wife, I didn't lease her.
That's pretty good.
Thank
Are
you.
you sure?
Well, no, but you see all the ads and it says Lisa Honda. And I said, honey, that could have been your last name if you had married
Mr. Honda.
one of the Honda
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, I know. Anyway, so she has been in a very nice, well, I can say it. She's been in a Cadillac for the last 3 years, and we're coming up on the end of this lease, and we're trying to replace it. We just had such a spectacular opportunity with this particular car that the payments are low, and my point is we're never going to be able to mirror that deal again. It was planets aligning. That's what it was. So we're looking at others, and I think this time we're probably going to purchase a pre-owned as opposed to leasing a new one.
Right.
Just something is leading me in that direction, and I tend to listen to that voice. So we've looked at. I love. I really am. I would love a Jeep if it were just me, but it's not.
Right.
And I've got a truck, and I love my truck. Even though it's not a Jeep, it's a Nissan Frontier. It's a great. I, like you, have been a Nissan guy myself. 350Z I had, and that was my midlife crisis car, and it did very well. But if it were just me, yeah, sure, I could live, and I would love a Jeep because it's manly, like you are, Nick.
Yeah. Well, and so on that Nissan topic, one of my biggest complaints, I guess, is, and one of the reasons I wouldn't necessarily, or I haven't necessarily found one. I had a Murano once, in the old body style Murano, and I absolutely loved that car. Problem with that was it was an S, which is the low end. So I like technology, I like newer things, and it didn't have all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my only complaint. But the way it drove was beautiful. My biggest complaint is that I am a Jeep fan. The closest thing to a Jeep in the Nissan lineup was the old Pathfinder,
right?
Or even more close, or even closer yet, was the Xterra, and they no longer make the Xterra. I would have bought an Xterra. That would have been hands down. I would have easily done that. Not necessarily if I had to choose between a Jeep and an Xterra. Up until 2018, I would have gone with the Xterra. And that goes back to why I would choose the Mercedes over the Jeep. The last model Jeep, the most recent, not the new one, but the one just before it, the one that started in 2007 and went to 2017. That was the worst Jeep that was ever made in my mind.
Oh, really?
I hated that Jeep. It's ugly as hell. I mean, it drove well. It was positioned well, but it did not look like a true Jeep to me. It looked like someone decided to make it more Play-Doh than Jeep. The newer Jeeps, the new one that just came out, is gorgeous. Now that I would choose hands down above and beyond anything else.
Well, so how about the pickup?
Love the Gladiator. I would do a Gladiator, but they're so expensive.
What is I haven't even looked at pricing on them. What is the price on
them? The base model, and I think the base model is kind of ugly because I don't like the fender flares, or the fenders rather.
Yeah.
The base model is right around 38, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and then, yeah, I know. So I happen to have Jeeps on my screen right now, and they're cool looking. So I'm looking at, and this is a friend of mine who owns a dealership. He has used 2018. There are 6 of them. Jeep Wranglers, unlimited,
really,
the 4-door Saharas.
Okay. See, the Sahara is the one I want because the fenders match the paint color.
Yes, and upgraded wheels and tires on all 6 of these. So it looks like a light lift kit and 28-inch I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the wheel size is,
Okay.
but certainly larger than stock.
All right.
And these are 36 grand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's one of the other things about Jeeps. Jeeps in the United States and maybe throughout the world, I'm not sure, but in the United States, Jeep is one of the um, highest retaining value of all vehicles, or it holds its value better than most vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons I have no problem buying a new Jeep, because in a lot of cases, at least payment wise, whether you lease or you purchase,
Uh-huh.
the payments are probably going to be the same or less than if you bought used. Not in all cases. There are some things that stand out. But I would rather, if I'm going to pay that amount of money, I would rather buy something that no one else has had a problem with. I don't want to inherit someone else's
Sure.
problems when it comes to a Jeep.
Sure.
There are a lot of other cars I would be fine buying used, but a Jeep is not necessarily one of them, unless I'm going for an older Jeep, like something from the 90s that has 150,000 miles on it. Then you know what you're getting. You know it's going to have problems, but
And that's a really good point. These, I mean, I'm looking, they range from 16,000 to 20,000 miles is all.
yeah, yeah. So
So,
you're going to inherit someone else's issue at that point,
potentially, but I
potentially.
mean, there are 6 of them, so it would lend me to believe that they got them in some method of multiples. You know, they're not.
Right,
It's would be more than coincidence for this non-Jeep new vehicle dealer to
right.
have 6 Jeeps that are equipped with the same mileage, with the same equipment. You know,
Yeah, it was
so
probably a lease turn in or something.
something like that, a group lease turn in. But
Yeah,
for some reason, I'm not sure what it is. I can't really put my finger on it. This is a vehicle that I wouldn't lease.
really.
Yeah, and I say that because it's one that Jeeps. It's like you have more of a relationship with the vehicle.
Yeah,
I love our Cadillac. I think it's a wonderful riding car and great, but I'm kind of tired of it. I'm kind of over it.
yeah.
And you're the perfect example. Jeeps are not like that. You kind of develop a relationship. So ownership of a Jeep just makes a little more sense to me than ownership of our CT6, for example.
Absolutely. Now, financially,
Yep.
I think you could probably get a Jeep payment a lot lower if you lease it than if you
Oh,
bought it.
oh, no question.
So if you're dealing with payments, but what I would probably end up doing personally, and something I'm looking at, is I would lease it for 2 or 3 years and then I'd buy it out.
Buy it at the end.
So same thing. I would still keep the Jeep, but yeah, which I might prove out to be stupid. You might be better off doing the payments over 72 months or 60 months or something like that. But I'm looking at all the math to see what is actually going to be better for my family and stuff
Well,
like
and
that.
that's smart, and that's a good way to look at it. Anyway, these are the ones that I'm looking at are they're all good looking vehicles. I mean, they really are. And like you said, the Sahara with the matching trim and matching hard tops, and they're very very
Yep.
nice. They're just
Yeah.
attractive
I
to
don't
look
care
at.
about the hard top. I probably would never put my hard top on if I had
No,
one. I would prefer a soft top. I know that sounds weird because a lot of people say, well, why would you do that? Because it's loud. Yeah, but it's a Jeep.
but if you lived back in Minneapolis, I think you would think differently.
Nope. I've had both. I had my very first one was a soft top and I had a hard top and I actually preferred the soft top.
I don't mind the noise. I'm thinking more of the retaining heat and cool
Didn't
and stuff
Never
like
had a
that.
problem.
No, huh?
My 97 Jeep Wrangler never had a problem retaining heat. I
Hmm.
never got cold in that cab.
Well,
And
that's
that
awesome.
was and I was driving it during one of the worst weather snaps they had up until recently. It was 30 below, 40 below before wind chill, and I never had a problem. I was
That's
perfectly
awesome.
comfortable inside.
But see, this is you knowing the brand and understanding, what it is and what it isn't.
Right. And they have other features too. There's in the old Jeeps, I don't know if they have them built yet for the newer Jeeps, but in the old Jeeps, you could actually get jackets that connected to the heat vent.
Really?
So and it was mainly for people that had the top down, but yeah, it would keep your body warm
That's
because you were connected. Hmm.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. I didn't have one of those. I actually just took blankets, and then anyone that was riding with me with the top down, if they got cold, we just put the blanket up and they just put their legs up high enough where the heat from the foot heater would come up inside the blanket and keep
You
them
were talking
warm.
about the top down the Jeep, not your passengers having their tops down.
Either or, it's fine.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's a whole different thing. Nice. Should we put the top down? Yes, maybe we'll do it on the car too.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Well, that's cool. So you've been
Yep.
kind of searching a little bit, but leisurely. You're not
Leisurely.
doing it. You're not
Well,
rushing into anything.
yeah, and the other consideration, something I've never owned, but I always wanted. My dad has always had them. My father-in-law has them. One thing I've kind of always wanted to is a truck. I've wanted a truck, which I think I've talked about this before. That's one thing I like about the Gladiator. It's a Jeep and a truck at the same time. But I am also looking at some trucks. And that's partly too because of an earlier conversation where we were talking about campers. If we pull a camper, it might be easier to pull a larger camper with a truck than it would be with a Jeep, because a Jeep's limited to its towing capacity, as is the Gladiator.
Well, I'm sure, and much like my so speaking of my Nissan Frontier, which again I like, is cool. It's the midnight edition, so it has the black wheels and it matches
Nice.
It is. It's a nice little truck. It's kind of the end of that generation, so it's lacking some of the technological advances that came about in 2019 and beyond, but
Right.
it's a great truck. I did hook it up to a friend's trailer because, as I said in one of our last episodes, I think it was our last episode, about potentially trailering our Harleys, and not just for that vacation we went on, but on one that we have upcoming here in a few months, and that's trailering at a long distance. So I tried to pull the trailer with my truck. I thought, well, this would be fine. We could hook it up to the Frontier and off we go. And it was, I mean, it pulled it just fine, but it was obviously a massive strain on the engine. It wouldn't go into high gear until we were going downhill. So
Oh, wow.
I know it was really bad. So, but again, nothing against the Frontier. It's not meant to tow, necessarily big items. And
Right.
it was probably a 2,000-pound trailer total with the stuff that was in it that we did the trial run with. And
That's it?
yeah, I know it wasn't much. And I
Oh,
was
man.
disappointed that because it would not go into overdrive. And so
Because it has a much higher towing capacity than that.
well, it
Isn't it?
does.
Isn't
It's
the
like 5,000 pounds, but I don't know what kind of modifications they do. But it would have to entail a transmission cooler, and I mean, because it would blow. I'm confident that the engine and or transmission would be toast at the end of a 3-hour drive.
Oh, absolutely. Especially the way you're making that sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, I towed with my second Jeep. My first Jeep didn't have a tow package. Never had any reason to tow anything.
Mhm.
My second Jeep did, and it was the
Mhm.
4.0 straight six. And I towed several things, but the heaviest thing I ever towed was
Mhm.
just a small fishing boat, like an aluminum fishing boat. It was I say small. It was I would say with the trailer and the boat and the engine and everything in the trailer, it was about 2,000 pounds.
Hmm.
Um, that Jeep, I didn't even feel it behind. And I've towed other things, just not with the Jeep. My dad had farm equipment and big trailers and horse trailers, and I've towed stuff
Sure.
like that before. So I know what it feels like to tow heavy
Hmm.
things. I didn't even
Really?
feel it behind the Jeep. And the Jeep does not have a very high tow rating, especially the old, that was a 2006. Those old ones, they weren't rated to tow all that much. I think 3,700 pounds, maybe 4,000 pounds was
Mhm.
at least that's what the max rating is now. I think 4,500 is the max rating now, something like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, they're
Wow.
not made to tow, but it did it without a problem.
Well, and I think, yeah, and that's great. It's to me, it's all about, or largely about gearing.
Yes.
When you look at total gross vehicle weight and towing capacity and all that,
Yep.
it has to be geared appropriately. So
And
anyway, and again,
so that you're speaking my language here too, because we got on in one of those rabbit holes on YouTube, and I've been watching the different videos on a lot of these different vehicles. So I'm not just considering the Jeep and a truck. I'm also looking at some fun things like the new Telluride, the Kia Telluride. I thought that
oh,
was
cool.
pretty interesting.
Hmm.
But So I was watching these things and how they tow and if they can tow campers and things like that and how well
Huh?
they tow. One thing that stood out to me was the Gladiator, the Jeep Gladiator, actually tows better with the automatic transmission than it does with the manual transmission.
You know, and that is typically the case if you look at, big or big trucks or vehicles that they use for towing. They really want automatic transmissions these days, just because the transmissions are so much better and more solidly built than they used to be. But if you're
Right.
an off-road guy,
And I grew up though with the opposite. When my dad was towing horse trailers and things like that, he wanted a
sure.
manual transmission because the automatics would just drop out of the
Hmm.
bottom of the truck.
Yeah, well, these days not so much. Although, of course, you still
No.
have, semis and all of that, and they're still geared and appropriately and so on. But
Yeah, but a lot of those are going automatic as well. I have a friend who's a truck driver for one of the local shipping companies in
uh-huh.
Nashville, and or I should say in Tennessee. Um, if anyone can guess what that shipping company is, but anyway, actually he doesn't work for that one. He works for its competitor. But he said half the time when he's driving an automatic.
Really
Yep.
interesting. Hmm.
Yeah.
That is, I guess I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. Of course, I'm
I didn't
not in the
either.
market to
That
buy
was
a semi
Yeah, that
truck.
was completely new to me. So, but back to you. You said you're looking at Jeeps and Mercedes. Is there anything else that you're considering
Oh, sure.
besides
I mean,
that?
I've looked at a couple of uh, um, BMWs, which uh, I don't know. I'm not
It's
sure.
one of my favorite cars too.
Yeah, it's. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but I've looked at a couple of those. We've owned a Lexus in the past, which we liked, and we kind of find ourselves in that. It's tough to go back and forth from a Cadillac to a Chevy or from a
Right.
Lexus to a Toyota. It's difficult to make that transition, even though we don't put a lot of miles on Lisa's car. So
Right.
it's just, what do you like, and what price range are you willing to be in, and that's kind of where you try and set the standard. But uh,
Sometimes it's hard to separate the two.
well, yes, no question, and it is it definitely is, and you see that uh, based on what you drive. It gives you a sense for, how comfortable others will be in it, and how
Right.
often you can take people with you, and how much space do you need for storage. And so we've
Exactly.
looked at a lot. We're just not in a rush, happily.
That's good. Yeah, and I think that's key because you want to make sure you make the right decision. And as I said before, that's the biggest problem I've had in the last 8 years is I didn't take my time. I just jumped in because the deal was good, and I ended up not. I have not hated, with the exception of the Sentra, and that's specific parts of the Sentra, not the Sentra as a whole. Besides the Sentra, I have not hated anything I've had. It's just not what I want.
Yeah.
It doesn't tick all my
Okay, so
boxes.
this makes me think of something with the Jeep, and talking about how it keeps its value, and it starts out high in price typically. Um,
Right.
anyway, and nothing against the Jeep, because they
And
obviously,
same with BMW, same with
for sure,
Mercedes, same
for
with
sure, but
Cadillac.
it's a Jeep, and that's where I know their engines. I know I know all about
Yeah.
them, and they're okay. They're fine. I think that it's illustrative of how big the foul up was at General Motors to lose Hummer.
Yes. Agreed.
And I'll tell you why, because Hummer was better off road than Jeep.
Oh yeah.
And
That's why the military replaced all their Jeeps with Hummer.
with Hummers, and well, essentially Hummers, but I mean, they're Humvees. That's
Right.
a little bit of a different vehicle. But I was actually on the team that helped introduce Hummer to dealers around the country, and it was really cool. Number one, because driving these things, and look, the H1 especially, which was like the Humvee, it's ridiculous. It's not a vehicle that 98% of the population should ever drive or want to
Right.
drive. But
Right. Unless you're the governor.
if you're the governor, or if you own ranch land or whatever, that thing can go everywhere. Two of the design engineers told me that if you could get traction, those things could climb a wall vertically.
Wow.
That's how well they were geared and how much power there was. And I was actually on there, and I may have mentioned this before, but I was on their proving grounds in South Bend, Indiana, or just outside of South Bend, and
Okay.
actually took them on their off-road course. It was amazing. And I went with I went down this rock wall, and it climbed down it beautifully. And we got done, and I'm just like, man, that was awesome. And the engineer says, spin around, you're going back up. And I said, what? It was crazy. And sure enough, it climbed back up and had no problems at all. But it just shows me just how poor marketing or poor planning or something was at work that made them have to lose that brand, because it was a very well performing vehicle line.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's any brand that has had that issue, and marketing is part of the big reason some things haven't survived. We talked about it in not the last episode, but the episode with Matt Smolik. We had the difference between VHS and Betamax. Why did Betamax lose out to VHS?
And you guys knew.
Yeah, well, we knew why we've discovered why it was better, but we never talked about why VHS actually won. I mean, yes, it had to do with cost as well, and that's why.
No, you talked about it. You said it during the episode.
But we did. But part of the problem, I mean, there are things that have made it into society that are more expensive than maybe they should be, or some of their counterparts could be, but it's based on marketing. You know, why did VHS win out over Betamax? Exclusive of price, was because marketing for VHS was that much better as a whole, not just the product, but also all of the ancillary products, the VCRs, the technology behind it, how easy it was to integrate, along with the cost. That was part of it, but still,
sure,
it's how do you brand something? How it's kind of like Kleenex. We all think when we say for facial tissue, we say Kleenex for the most part. Not everybody, but most people. But it has nothing to do with the facial tissue industry. There are many brands out there. But we call it Kleenex because of the marketing, and the marketing is so well done. The branding is so well done, and I think that kind of goes into the car industry as well. You know, there are a few brands out there that might actually be better vehicles than others. Or you can even look at the high end. Let's talk about BMW and Mercedes. In reality, you've owned them, you've driven them. Are they any better in many cases than a Ford? Now, this is I could argue both sides of this, so don't even start. But can you really tell the difference when you get into a Chevy versus a Mercedes? In reality, is there anything, with the exception of the high end stuff? I'm just talking about base model.
Sure.
Is there really a difference?
Vehicles are much closer to parity today than they ever were before.
Right.
So I would say yes. I mean, if I've owned some Mercedes and I've owned a BMW and I've owned a Lexus, and I can usually get inside those vehicles and tell the difference between that and I've owned a Chevy and I've owned Fords and I've owned yes.
Well, and what I mean by that, I'm
not everyone can,
excluding the quality, because that's a different story. I mean, there is definitely quality built in my opinion, built into German cars that may not exist in other vehicles. I will grant you that. I'm just talking about pure comfort and technology. I mean, if you sit inside of a BMW as the example, you look at the dashboard, it's not necessarily any more advanced or any different than if you were to climb into a Chevy. Chevy probably has more technology.
Probably less advanced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's more refined, but it's less advanced.
It depends on your definition of refined. It's older technology.
Yep.
That's why, and I'm inclusive and maybe even especially talking about BMW and Mercedes in this vein, they have long been far behind in GPS technology,
Yes.
and many of the highline brands just could not get out of their own way to work in that realm. And I'm a big, you know what, you and I travel a lot, so I'm terrible with directions, and I just don't have a sense for that stuff. So I rely heavily on GPS,
Hmm.
and so because I'm an Android guy, I use Android Auto whenever I can, whether I'm renting a car or our Cadillac has Android Auto. But some vehicles do not, and instead they try to develop their own and have to update software. And
Yep.
you know what? Farm it out to somebody else who has it figured out.
Right. Which
Apple
there are
CarPlay
some
is
some
it's the same
manufacturers that are figuring that out
slowly,
slowly, very
slowly.
slowly.
Gosh. So I mean, that's the part that just blows me away, because I'm so used to using Google Maps because that's what I use. My
Yep.
phone goes into my rental cars, and that's what gets me where I need to go. So to try and develop your own thing, reinventing the wheel, and it's less effective and less reliable, I don't get that.
Right. And I will have to admit that part of the reason I don't have a new car right now, I actually was going to pull the trigger on a new truck. I won't name the brand, but there are a few brands that, because of who we work for, that John and I do get a discount from. So there was an incredible deal on one, and I almost pulled the trigger. But the one thing that stopped me, that made me think, and I still might pull the trigger, but it made me stop and think, is the fact that this particular truck does not have Apple CarPlay in it. And
Yeah.
that was a big enough reason for me to say, do I
Yep.
really want to put up with this for 3 years?
Yep. And my Harley Davidson, if I wait till 2020, they will have Apple CarPlay. I'm not an Apple guy. I said, how about Android Auto? Ooh, maybe 21. Maybe really? Are you kidding me?
Right. And
55% of the market is owned by Android.
well, okay.
45% ish
So
by
that
Apple.
brings me back to that branding thing. And
Yes.
I'm probably not the only one that thinks this way, but when I say Apple CarPlay, in my mind, I also include Android. It's not a
Oh,
one or the other thing.
for a
Yes,
lot of
I am
manufacturers,
an
it is.
Apple person, and I would like Apple CarPlay, but I use them interchangeably.
So I was this morning thinking about it a little bit as I was using an ear swab, and
I wasn't
because
going to
no
say
one
it.
says ear swab.
I was going to leave that one alone.
No, I didn't want you to.
Oh,
Because it's Q-tip or it's Kleenex or
right,
it's
right.
fridge.
Yeah,
And that's all marketing does for this stuff. But you still have
exactly.
to back it up at some point. You have to have
Yes,
the quality. You know why I like Q-tips? Because the off-brand stuff of ear swabs are not nearly as good. They don't have
they're
as thick
really not.
cotton. They're not as sturdy. They're, whatever it is, they're not as good. Heinz ketchup. You know why I like Heinz ketchup? Because it tastes the way I want ketchup to taste.
Right,
It's it's probably more than half sugar.
right. That's
But
probably why you like the way it tastes.
if you, I know exactly. I don't know how they do it, but it's delicious. Uh, so, but there are certain brands that I'm not willing to compromise on.
Right.
And
Well,
one is Q-tips, one is Heinz ketchup. I when you say Kleenex, I actually prefer Puffs,
there you go.
but I still call
A
it
nose in
Kleenex.
need deserves puffs indeed.
Nicely done, boy. That marketing worked on
It
you.
did work. It did work. Just not well enough to get everyone to say, "Oh, I just need a puffs."
Because some people think you're going to want to smoke pot
Right. I didn't even think that.
automatically.
Puff, puff, pass. Um, yeah, but and you're absolutely right. So here's another thing too, and this is before iPhone, before Apple had its massive explosion. Right around the time that Steve Jobs came back. We won't get into the details of when and each point of the history or each part of the history, but mainly when Steve Jobs came back.
Yep.
Everyone calls their computer a PC.
Yep.
PCs were synonymous for the most part with Windows machines,
True.
not with Apple's, not with what's Ubuntu, Linux,
Yeah.
not with any of those other. And now we could throw Chromebook into that as well. It was a Windows machine. That's your PC, right?
Yep.
And quality wise, and I know it can be argued, I can argue it myself, but quality wise, the better machine has pretty much always been a Mac. When it comes to reliability and usability, it's always been at the top of the food chain when it
Well, let's
comes to
just
that.
say
But
that it's more expensive
it is more expensive too. But
across the board.
there's a better. I have Macs that are 10, 15 years old that run like they were when they were brand new.
Yep.
They're fantastic. They're fantastic machines, but they didn't have, until Steve Jobs really didn't have the marketing oomph behind it
Mhm.
to beat out Windows machines. So
Yeah.
Windows machines became very um, prolific.
Yes.
I would say
Right.
when it in the market, and they had a better marketing arm behind it. Even though you get a PC and it doesn't necessarily last the same amount of time as something like a Mac.
Sure. Well, it's two layers of that. I mean, if you uh, I'm of the belief that that there are going to be updates, and so especially illustrated with Apple with iPhones,
Yes.
that people are going to buy the newest, the next thing, because if you have planned obsolescence somewhere along the line, there's always going to be the next thing. And you're
Oh,
always going to
absolutely.
resell all of those people who are big devotees and, have to have the next big thing. That's the lines at the Apple store waiting for the next new phone. Now, that's not as I don't think that happens as often now as it used to. But gosh, when they
No.
would update the iPhone, it was crazy. And I've never, and no offense to Apple, it's not, I like a lot of things they've done. I wish I would have invested 30 years ago
Sure.
in Apple.
Sure.
I've always been an Android guy. And so to watch that, it's pretty amazing because they've never had the same sort of appetite for updating with Android. Not that it's not there; it's just not as you said, prolific as it
Right.
is in this case with Apple.
Well, and if you really want to get into details, and I will admit that my information is old. It came from 2013, 2014
Oh, that's just
when I was told
terribly
this.
old.
But the biggest difference between an Android phone and an Apple phone is the failure rate.
Mm,
And I think Android back then, the failure rate was hovering around 38%,
mm.
where the failure rate of an iPhone was right around 5%.
Well, and I guess how you define that would have to be part of it. I just know that Android owns the marketplace and always has.
Oh, it does. It's very, yeah. Well, the biggest reason why it's there, you're talking about the operating system. You're not talking about the phone itself.
Correct.
iPhone, you have one brand, one manufacturer.
Yep,
With Android, you've got 10 manufacturers.
that's correct. And I'm not
So
sure that there is an arguable benefit either way.
no, I don't think. Well, it does. I think you can argue if it comes down to failure rates because you have one manufacturer who's responsible for one phone type, who can make sure that all of the components in that phone are going to work the same way, no matter what operating system, because they manage the operating system as well.
Sure.
Whereas on an Android phone, you've got Motorola, you've got um, Huawei, you've got all of these other manufacturers
Samsung,
that are Samsung that are building these
LG.
phones that rely on an operating system that's built by a third party source.
But
Or you could look at it.
I'm sure there are consistencies across the board. I don't
Oh,
think
I'm sure
the
there
failure
has
rate
to be.
differential is near what it was according to your data.
Probably not. No, it's probably much better now because they're putting a lot more effort into the phones and the quality of the
And
phones.
like vehicles, I think greatly they've reached parity on many
Yep,
levels.
absolutely.
Because if
I
they
100
don't, the marketplace will not accept that any longer.
right. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
100% agree. But I used to use the analogy when I was selling cars between the brands, and I
Mhm.
would say, okay, if you take a Ford, and this is again before we've reached parity,
Yep.
you take a Ford and you take a Mercedes, and you put the two together, base models, whatever. You could do the high end of the Ford and the base model of the Mercedes,
Sure.
so you can compare a little bit closer apples to apples. Yes, the Mercedes is more expensive. Yes, the Mercedes is more expensive to fix.
Mm.
But in 10 years, which one's still going to be on the road?
Sure.
And it's usually going to be the Mercedes
Often.
because it's built with a higher quality or a higher level of engineering than the Ford was. The Ford was just built to get out quick and get it on the road.
And to that point, you're still going to have a lot more people that buy Fords than buy Mercedes.
Exactly. Yep.
So
No,
sometimes
100%.
it's the initial investment, that is a big defining factor. Even if you can make an argument for longevity, and if you and I are selling Mercedes, that's the argument we're going to make. If we're selling
Absolutely.
Fords, we're going to talk about initial outlay and perhaps ownership costs over the longer term.
Yep. Yep.
Anyway, so it's interesting. But with cars,
and I use that, and I used to compare it to the difference between a PC and a Mac.
sure.
Because it was the same thing. Do you want a computer that's more expensive to fix, but it'll last 10 years, or do you want to buy a PC that you're going to have to replace in 2 years?
Yeah. And that's so here's what's different about cars, and it really has to do with valuation and how long they hold their value and so on. With cars, and I don't know about other people, but I've been in the car business for so long that I get tired of cars real quickly.
Yes, me too.
Back in the day, we used to drive, when I worked at a dealership, we used to drive demonstrators, and those were new vehicles. My first one was an Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme Coupe.
Oh, that's a great car.
It was a great car back then. It was early 80s, 1981. And mine was a diesel, though.
Really?
They developed a diesel engine for those vehicles, and it was great in Wisconsin because farmers wanted diesels. They could fill their tractors up and their cars up from the same fuel tank on the farm.
Right.
And so anyway, that was my first. It was a diesel. And it's not like a Mercedes diesel. It was an Oldsmobile diesel, which was interesting. But I had that car, and then I moved on to another. One year, I probably had 20 different cars because they kept getting sold. And it's kind of bled over into today where I get tired of vehicles. After 3 years, really, I'm done with this.
Yeah. I can honestly say the only cars I never got sick of were what, John? What car have I never gotten sick of?
Oh, Jeeps, of course.
No, that's not it. Not kidding.
Well, to you, big liar.
Yeah. No, that's I could have kept my Jeeps forever.
Yeah.
I'd still be driving the 97 if I could.
And that's awesome. And I think but it's a different relationship you have with a Jeep than you have with a Sentra, for example. No offense to Sentra.
It's not a great daily driver. It really isn't. It should be used as a toy. And that's the point. If I would have been able to go out when I sold my first Jeep and buy, or instead of having to go out and buy or trade in that car on a new car, I would have rather have just been able to go out and buy another car and just garaged the Jeep.
Yep.
That would have been ideal. I had that opportunity with my second Jeep, but a little child will hurt that.
Sure. Blame it on the kid.
I'm going to. That's the only thing I'll ever blame her for. No, I'm kidding. I don't blame her at all. It was the right choice at the time.
It's just a life choice.
There were other. Well, it was a life choice, and there were other financial reasons. Sure. My Jeep was paid off, and I was able to pay off a lot of things with it when I got rid of it, which we needed to do because we were starting a business at the time. So
totally understand. And that's my brother has a Wrangler and loves it, and of course he occasionally lives vicariously through his son, who it was when he was in college, who is now graduated. Congratulations, Sawyer. When he was in college, my brother Bruce would often talk about how, oh yeah, Sawyer takes it down on campus and all the hotties are all over him. And well, yeah, because he's a young, good-looking kid in a Jeep, and and it's not you or me in a Jeep.
Yep.
Because young girls look extremely disappointed when they see a hot car or a cool Jeep or something like that, and then they see a 50-year-old dude behind the wheel.
Yes. Yes.
Supremely disappointed.
But I don't care.
I don't care either. And, you know what? It's time for a segue.
Oh, segue.
No, actually, that's exactly what I said to a friend of mine when we were on vacation in Door County, as I talked about before.
Get off the bike and get on a Segway?
No, there was a guy across the street. They had like a Segway tour. There were 5 or 6 of them. and they're all, meeting together before they go on the Segway tour. And and I dude looking out the window right behind him. And I said, "Oh, it's time for a Segway." He says, "To what?" I said, "No, turn around. It's time for a Segway." Because these guys were all on Segways. And then we saw a guy on the main road, Highway 57, I think it was, out of Door County, and he's riding a Segway with a cup of coffee holding in his hand
Oh,
on
wow.
the road. And I'm going, okay, you're an
That's
idiot.
dedication right
I
there.
hope you spill it. That's all all right. That was a good segue.
Oh, my goodness. That was a good segue. I like that. Segue.
So what else? What else is going on in your world? We talked about
Oh,
the 4th of July a little bit. You
yeah.
had a
What did
good
you do?
time and
You never told us what you did
unplanned.
on the 4th. What did you do on the 4th?
We actually went to a friend's cabin and rode the Harleys up and went with another set of friends and just had a really nice day at their cabin. And so in Wisconsin, and not unlike much of the Midwest, Michigan, probably you could say the same in Minnesota from your days then, it's not uncommon for people to own like vacation cottages or whatever.
Right, right.
And this place, this friend's place, notwithstanding, because it's a beautiful home. It's not a vacation cottage, but we used to have a quote unquote cottage, and it was that. It was a
Yeah.
shack. In fact, we called it that, the deer shack,
Nice.
where Dad used to go hunting. And my only problem with that, and even owning another property, I've thought about Arizona because of the warmer weather and stuff like that you and I have talked
Hmm.
about. But then you feel compelled to go there all the time.
Right.
Right? So in your free time, well, we've got all this money invested. I guess we better go to the cottage, or we better go to the awesome home. And they are nice. They're wonderful. But I don't know. I kind of like to go to different places.
Yeah, kind of the idea behind getting a camper or an RV is
Right.
that thought. And we've wrestled with that.
Yep.
My daughter
Yep.
would kind of rather have a farm right now, but I think that's just because she wants a horse. And she thinks if we have a farm, we'll have a horse. I'm like, no, because we're not going to live there. But yeah, so I understand that thought. It's a tough decision to make when you're looking at stuff like that. Definitely.
But I look at RVs too, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, that it's they're awesome when you're using them, but when you're not, they're parked in your driveway, or you got to rent some sort of
Right.
space to put them in or whatever. And I mean, we talked with Matt about that when he was on our
Yep.
25th show, and I just I would love to have one, but I just want to give it back. So they rent them now too,
Yeah. Oh, but they're so expensive. It's almost cheaper to buy one for 6 months and then sell it back than it is to
Yeah,
rent one for a couple weeks.
really.
Yeah, I mean it's
Oh gosh.
insane. For if it again, if you're comparing apples to apples, you could get
Yeah.
a cheaper one and rent it, but it's not going to have everything you want it to have.
Right.
So
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I didn't even know the comparison breakdown between. I mean, I did see a place, and frankly, they were terrible. And you and I deal with websites a lot, so they had a crappy
oh
website,
yeah,
and their follow up wasn't good. But they take RV owners, and then it's like a management company that will rent them to other people
yeah,
for you.
right.
And so, like, it's bringing in quote unquote ROI, or invest some sort of income
Right.
off, your incredibly expensive
Investment, right.
vehicles that you have.
Oh boy.
So,
Well, they do that for
yeah.
cars now too. Which is pretty interesting. You can rent out your
So,
own
what do you
car.
think about that? What do you think about the future of that?
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's it's. I think there are good things and there are bad things. I think for a person who doesn't want to own a car or doesn't want to rent from Avis or something like that, it's I think it's going to be phenomenal. But on the same side, if people start renting other people's cars, that means fewer people are buying cars necessarily, maybe,
Mhm.
and that might lead to increased prices from the manufacturers, which will drive car prices up even more. So again, that's all speculative, but it could happen that way. It happened in a lot of other industries, so why not in the car industry? And cars
Yeah.
still are not cheap. And On the flip side, we've talked about this before too. Yes, cars are not cheap, but dealers do not make that much on cars.
No.
I had a dealer who showed me the invoice on a truck he just ordered,
Yep.
and the invoice for the truck was $69,000. MSRP was $71,000.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that incredible?
Well, and you think about it, what other industry is that accurate where it's such a tiny profit margin?
Very few.
And you can go online and find out what that invoice number is
Right.
anywhere. I mean, it's easy to do.
Yeah.
So not only am I not going to have a markup to speak of, I'm also going to tell you what it is.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
there's literally zero chance of me making any money on the sale of an automobile.
Yeah.
At least a new automobile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
And we
crazy.
see that among dealers, our dealer clients, that a lot of them are in fact steering people toward pre-owned vehicles because
Well, because they can make money on them.
they can make a profit. And look, I'm not against making a profit for anybody. If I get construction work done around the house, or I have, somebody that I hire to do some electrical stuff, and I don't mind paying them a profit. I want them to stay in business. I
Absolutely.
don't want them to make their entire annual income off me, but
Right.
I still want to support them.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you. And there's some cases where I will look at, and I have looked at a dealer and said, okay, you're giving me this. I know, because I know where it is, because I work in the industry. I have access to this stuff. I know you're giving it to me at invoice minus rebates, stuff like that. I want you to make a little money. So, where would you like to make it? Would you want to make it on the back end? I'll give you $1,000. Because in the grand scheme of things, $1,000 is not going to change my payments all that much.
No, and frankly, you're doing something that is probably going to allow them to give you goodwill on down the road if you need some help, or
Exactly.
Whatever. And there's an argument to be made there, because they're used to getting beaten up so badly that when you're nice to them
and you're giving them money, excuse me,
they'll give you everything.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Hopefully the person that I'm going to buy a car from next isn't listening to this, whoever that might be. But...
So how much profit are you going to pay, Nick?
Exactly.
That's awesome.
But
Dude,
again,
we have run the gamut today, haven't we?
We really have. But I want to make one other quick point,
Please.
just to the fact that we are in the business, so we do get a little bit better deal on cars than the standard person anyway.
Sometimes.
So,
I don't
for
think
the most part.
True.
For the most part. I mean, they will give us a little bit better deal.
I get manufacturers discounts, and you too, and but it's not huge. I mean, it's not like it's $5,000 or anything.
No, it's not huge at all. But it's so I'm a little bit, if I were just buying a car outright without my employee discount, I probably would not have that conversation with a dealer. I will be just perfectly frank about that. It's not, I'm not that altruistic.
Well, it depends. See, if the dealer's a friend of mine, I don't expect them to sell me a car and lose money. In fact, I don't anticipate they're in business to do that, and I'm okay with it. But I'm not going to be easy on them.
No.
I remember
we are still getting exceptional deals.
I remember very clearly when we bought a van, and it was a very hard to get van, and I knew that, and it's been many years ago. And we had a full-size pickup truck to trade in. And one of my best friends ever in the car business, rest his soul, said to me, you think your truck is worth this much and it's not. And I said, Al, what is it about my truck that scares you? And he looked at me and shook his head. And then he swore at me.
Yep.
And so.
All right, Mr. Man. It's been fun. We have covered a lot, and we didn't even get to the lake monsters in the United States that I pulled up.
We
just
didn't
in
even
case.
get to the stuff we were going to talk about.
No, we really didn't. Nope. Is that unusual? I don't think so.
It's totally normal for the potty mouths.
Oh my goodness. But if you do want to hear more from us or see more once we actually start posting more, you can head over to Facebook and look up PoddiMouths. We are at PoddiMouths on almost all of our accounts except for Twitter, where we're at MouthsPoddy.
Oh, Potty.
but you can find us on Instagram, Facebook. You can also look up Eat, Drink, Road on Instagram as well. We post a lot of stuff there. And head over to Patreon if you want to support this endeavor so you can hear us not get to this point a lot more.
A whole lot more.
A whole lot more. But also, head over to our website. We're working on it all the time. Eventually, we might even get some merchandise up there. That would be kind of fun.
Yes,
I'd love to see people walking around with Potty Mouth Sings, or I saw a shirt on one of my YouTube videos yesterday. They were a couple people traveling in Vietnam, and they actually had a Burger King shirt, or looked like Burger King, but it's had, in America we call it pho. So it said Faux King, but you're not supposed to pronounce it faux. You pronounce it pho.
Wow.
Yeah. We might put that up there too. I would love that. I think we need more shirts like that in our world without kids around. But anyway.
Without kids around, yes.
Without kids around, yeah. Well, they wouldn't get the joke because they'd say Faux King. I don't get it. No, you pronounce it pho.
You do not give kids enough credit.
I know. Oh, trust me, I do. I just say that because I'm diluting myself.
I know you are.
Anyway.
Diluting or eluding, one of the two. You choose.
Right. Go up to our website and to visit us there and check out some of our episodes. Subscribe to all of our podcasts on your favorite podcast listening app. And we'll catch you on the flip side. Oh, you can also go to our website and sign up for a newsletter, which right now only tells you when we're going live, but eventually might give you some other Potty Mouths news.
Yes.
John, anything else you want to toss in there?
I want to
toss into the salad.
I want to say thank you to our listeners. It is awesome to have you out there, and see ya.